Hi, everybody. I'm Glenn Richards. I'm with the law firm of Dickinson, Wright in Washington, D.C. I've been practicing in the communication space for 40 years now, and just want to thank Dario and MEF for asking me back. We're going to do this a little bit differently for this panel. I'm going to give a quick overview on what's happened in D.C. Since the last MEF meeting, and then I'm going to hand it off to my panelists to introduce themselves and talk about their compliance challenges and how they're addressing those risks. So if this works, we'll be done with the formal presentations in about 22 minutes, 23 minutes, hopefully leaving lots of time for questions as well. So since the last meeting, for those of you not in Washington, D.C., you may not know this, we have a new president. So that has obviously changed the dynamic in Washington. For those of you, the FCC is made up of 5 commissioners, 3 of whom were appointed by the president's, part of the president's party, and 2 that are generally, the non-winning party. We are in this period now, which is a little awkward because the Democratic chair, as per sort of norms, resigned her position on January 20th. The president quickly nominated Brendan Carr, who was a sitting commissioner, to be the chair. So we are in this position now where we actually have 2 R's and 2 D's, which makes it difficult for the Republican chair to get his agenda through because he doesn't arguably have a majority. So the way that gets addressed is the president has nominated a woman named Olivia Trusty, who is a Republican, to take the open seat that would then give Brendan Carr his majority. The complication is that we are now almost 2.5 months since that nomination, and Olivia Trusty still hasn't even been through the subcommittee confirmation process. So until that happens, and then she needs to be confirmed by the Senate, until that happens, Chairman Carr is sort of hamstrung trying to get anything out that would be sort of controversial and is sort of left with an agenda that has to be approved by all 4 commissioners, both the Ds and the 2 Rs. The other new news and complication is that one of the Ds, Jeffrey Starks, just announced that he's resigning in the spring, didn't give a date. So again, under norms, and this is not kind of norm time, the president would then go to the Senate minority leader, who in this case is Chuck Schumer, get his recommendation for a Democrat to fill that seat, and that person would then get nominated and go through the process, and we'd have a full 5-person commission. I'm not going to try to project what this president will do under the circumstances. He is not arguably required under any to quickly nominate someone. He may try to nominate someone that doesn't sort of align with with the Democratic Party's principles. Arguably, he could also just not fill the seat. The complication comes, the FCC, unlike other agencies, arguably though it has 5 commissioners, can actually make changes with only 3 commissioners. So it's possible that nobody gets appointed to that seat, and he then rides with his 2-to-1 majority. The other complication is that there are rumors that the other Republican, Nathan Symington, is waiting to leave and plans to resign. So a lot going on at the FCC at this point. Now, just a couple of other quick highlights. I think Caitlin mentioned this morning the new rules under Do Not Originate. In that same order, the FCC required voice service providers that are blocking traffic based on analytics to use a SIP code 603 plus to notify calling parties that their calls have been blocked to give them an opportunity for redress. That rule takes effect in a year. The other interesting case, the FCC's only issued 1 significant enforcement ruling since Chairman Carr took over. Many of you may have heard about it. This is the Telnex case. Telnex has been issued what's called a notice of apparent liability and has been potentially fined $4.5 million because it facilitated 1,800 robocalls over the course of about a day, most of which actually went to FCC staff and their families trying to notify them of a FCC fraud control. I mean, the whole thing was a major scam. And what's interesting here are two things, and I think one of them is an important takeaway. Unlike most folks, Telnex has sort of come out firing and filed its response publicly. If you haven't seen that response, it's probably worth reading. It's available online. I can get it to you as well. But what the FCC charged Telnex with doing, and I think we've heard this term a number of times today, is it failed to meet know your customer requirements. And this is an interesting issue because while the FCC has a rule requiring KYC, the FCC has been very specific about not specifying what those KYC obligations are. So one of the arguments that Telnex makes is, you can't fine me $4.5 million because I have KYC standards. You have never enunciated KYC standards, so you are not in a position to tell me as an enforcement agency that I have violated something that you have specifically never specified what those rules were. Fascinating case, but I think there's probably a lot to learn there. So I've taken my 5 minutes. I'm going to now hand off to the panel, let them introduce themselves, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions. Khaled, one.
Khaled Bitar, I'm CEO of Avtal. We help our clients resolve their past due accounts.
I'm Brien Jones-Lantzy. I'm head of compliance, fraud, and security for Vonage.
Sarah Giraldi at EZTexting, Director of Compliance and Messaging Operations.
Great. So the first question that I'd like to ask all of you is, in your roles, what are your compliance challenges, and what advice can you give to all of these folks on how to best address those challenges?
I think for us, there are a lot of competitors in our space, and we differentiate ourselves using compliance. So a lot of people are surprised, and they think that sales and compliance have a trade-off, but in our case, I actually think that our approach to compliance helps us a lot. So we do three things on the compliance side really well, I think. The first is proactive opt-out monitoring. The second is how we actually opt people out. And then the third is our messaging in the sales and onboarding process with our clients. So on the opt-out monitoring side, we have an internal tool we've created that gives us opt-out rates by client on a rolling 7-day and 14-day average in real time. And then we get alerted if anything goes above 2%. And in that case, we'll have an investigation, a conversation with our clients, and then an audit of them if necessary. And our head of product tracks this nightly and reports it out to the CTO and myself on a twice-a-week basis. On the actual opting out side, we process the deact files on a nightly basis. Of course, we don't want to send to someone who's ported a number over. And then we'll opt people out in real time. I don't think there's any reason to wait. And then we use a keyword approach to opting people out in multiple languages. We're building the AI-based approach right now, but it started manual to get the feedback of what people were saying, to pick it up in different languages, the different typos and misspellings. Then it went to keyword, and now we're going to the natural language processing side. And then lastly, in sales and onboarding conversations, what we tell our clients is that we take, in our opinion, a heavy-handed approach to it. We won't let them do things that are non-compliant, that they may want to do out of ignorance, or if they're a bad actor. And we think if we're selling to the right people, this really helps us, and they understand that it's going to protect their organization. And yes, we may lose a deal or two because of this approach, but I think it's a good filtering mechanism because the people that would have had a problem with this probably aren't the people that we want to do business with. So we're really upfront with what we do with our clients at the beginning, and if they want to work with us and think we're the right firm to work with as a result, then I think it will work out, and we tend to not have problems. But if they are asking questions that give us a little bit of an uneasy feeling, we may pull back and say, hey, we're probably not the best fit. You can go work with one of our competitors.
Brian. Yeah, thanks so much. For us, the compliance realm has gotten a little bit confusing, as Glenn had talked about all the different changes and then the pullbacks of the different rules and regulations and laws. What we're trying to do is we're trying to educate our customers as much as humanly possible. We create a better understanding for a community page for them. We understand how and why they get a high opt-out rate. We engage with them as much as we possibly can to try and make sure that we mitigate any of those risks they might have. We do exactly what Khaled had done, where we require them to have not just the 5 opt-out keywords, but there's a multitude of ones where, like, if somebody types in STOPP, that's an automatic opt-out. Or if they put an expletive into the response, that's an opt-out. So, well, because we have to listen to the sentiment and intent of the consumer. Just the 5 keywords is not enough. And so as individuals that we lead the compliance in the industry, we have to make sure that we are listening to all of our customers. And it's good guidance that we can give to the brands that work directly with us. So by being able to really give them good guidance, give them direction, work with them, as well as Glenn had opened up for us, talk about what's happening on the political stage, and then how will it and does it affect them, then we can, beat down some of this confusion as much as possible.
Sarah?
Yeah, so for EZTexting, we have, over 20,000 brands and ranging anywhere from small business through enterprise. So experience with all levels of how well our customers are familiar with compliance. That being said, I don't want to sound like a broken record because we do all the same as far as managing the opt-out for the customer, but really providing that reporting back to them so they can pull, whether it's a 7-day average, 30-day, 60-day, and look at their average of opt-out and that percentage rate, but also break it down per campaign. If they want to look at just one message that they sent out, like what does the opt-out rate look like that compared to the lifetime that they've had with EZTexting. Also beyond that, though, with our opt-out response that we have for our customers, they cannot manipulate that. And within that opt-out message, we have what we call safe stop. And we give the consumer an option to reply with the keyword report, and that feeds a feedback loop to us at EZTexting. So beyond the opt-out percentage rate, we also have that internal report rate. So if a consumer has gone past the opt-out of replying stop, and then they go additional step further and reply report, we know for sure beyond looking at the opt-out rate, we need to investigate how this customer is interacting with their consumers.
So follow-up question. There are FCC rules, but the states have also gotten involved with state TCPA variations, with AI rules and regulations. Two-part question. How do you stay on top of all of this at your organizations? But also, where do you draw the line between providing guidance to your customers, but also feeling like I don't want to give you legal advice because I don't want you to come back to me if something runs afoul, and then all of a sudden you're pointing the finger at me because you've gotten in trouble with a regulator?
Yeah, so I think we have a CCO, Chief Compliance Officer at our organization, who works with us in part-time basis. He works with a couple others to help us with any state and local laws. And I think as long as you're following the best practice guidelines, you're generally okay in regards to compliance. We, in some cases, will take the legal burden. We don't mind doing it because we're confident we're doing things appropriately. So we'll say, yes, we will have full control over what's sent, when it's sent, how it's sent, and we're willing to own that legal burden, but they will have no control in their case, which in a lot of cases is what they want because they don't know these guidelines, they don't live and breathe this. So I think we're willing to take that approach and just make sure we're adhering to all the best practices and federal, state, and local laws.
All right, I'm actually going to add another point for you is, what about international too? I mean, you guys are not just a domestic company, so same question for you, but expand it to how do you stay on top of the international?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we really do try to indemnify ourselves when we are giving guidance. And it's just that. We do not give legal advice, we give guidance to our partners and our brands that are out there. In regards to the international market, there are a wild number of complexities that can keep us busy all day long. So we actually do work with third parties that they can give us and do give us updates on a weekly and a monthly basis of what are some of the legislations that's happening in France and in Spain and Taiwan, and what do we need to do in Australia, making sure that we are compliant. Because at Vonage, it's not just messaging, it's also voice, and it's numbering, and a multitude of different product sets that it gets very, very complex. We do have a team of lawyers on staff that, they help to interpret the actual ruling, the regulations, legislation. But then what we try and do is we try and make it digestible for the market, and we work with more on education. We work with our brands. We say, are you aware that this must happen? As well as if we need to change our platform at all, then we can do that, and we put out quite a few communication notes.
Sarah?
Yeah, so same, following the best practices, as well as we subscribe internally to as much communication as we can, so we know if there's any changes, particularly by state, if we're not following that super closely. But same thing, the customer does have a responsibility as well to make sure that they're adhering to all the messaging best practices, and they need to be, it's a continual education, and we have to meet our customers where they're at. We try to take off as much burden as possible, knowing that not everybody is super familiar. I mean, your first 5 minutes, you can tell you eat, sleep, and breathe this, but not all of our customers do, so we need to make sure that we can do as much for them as possible.
We didn't sort of tee this up on the sort of the earlier part of this, but we've heard a lot about AI today. How are you guys using AI within your platforms and tools? And has the use of AI kind of created new compliance obligations or requirements that you're now having to stay aware of?
We've evaluated it, but we haven't really used it yet. I think the first step for us will be the natural language processing on the sentiment, which isn't that difficult. But beyond that, there is this whole regulatory world around it that we haven't explored yet. So it's something we're just not going to touch until we're comfortable with it from a regulatory perspective.
Right. And from our perspective, we're absolutely diving deep into the AI pool. So we utilize it for sentiment and intent. We also utilize it for proximity of messaging. So we look for that when we're doing filtering of the actual outbound message as well as the inbound message from the consumer. So if you say something like on social media, I kicked cancer's ass, well, that's a positive sentiment, but the AI tool has been trained for that. And then if you say something like very defamatory against X individual for political messaging and it's incitement of violence, that's something that we would be able to look at as well. We're also looking at outside sources. So we're working with one of the major computer manufacturers that they can create an AI review platform in a Faraday environment so that we can take that data in, we can ingest it within half of a nanosecond. They can spit out opportunity of review.
Sarah?
I would say we're slightly in between. So we're cautiously testing things out and implementing with AI. So, especially when it comes to intent. So it's no longer, content filtering can go well beyond just looking for certain keywords and the behavior of the customers. It is trying to decipher what is the intent behind this message, even if there's nothing super specific in the content itself. Like, what is the end goal? What's the end state for this customer? What are they actually trying to do? Is it malicious? Because sometimes you can kind of find that out through, like human behavior. If we read that past the content filtering, you can say, yes, this was malicious, this was harmful to the consumer, but there was no specific keyword in this message that would have otherwise flagged it.
So we've heard a lot of talk today. We did some talk about the CTI messaging guidelines. I think it's probably just worth mentioning just a couple of things. I think everybody in this room probably knows that the FCC a few years ago classified messaging as an information service, which basically took it into a less regulatory environment than the voice world. I'm sure Brien is well aware of the distinctions about the differences between voice and text. However, in terms of robotext and robocalling, obviously the FCC has been very aggressive. One of the interesting proceedings that Chairman Carr has instituted, he referred to it as delete, delete, delete. It's consistent with other executive orders that came out of the White House. And basically, it was a public notice the FCC issued a few weeks ago saying, listen, we know that there are tens of thousands of regulations on the books, and we're giving the public an opportunity to file comments and tell us which of those we should get rid of. I mean, sort of a fascinating proceeding for someone who's been doing this for a long time. I'm not sure I can recall anything like this, but comments in that docket are due April 11th. A number of my clients have sort of thrown out there the idea that maybe some of the confusion around TCPA, some of the confusion around robo-texting, some of the confusion around the robocalling rules may be prime for something like this. So, if you guys were talking to the FCC and had a minute or two with the chairman, are there certain regulatory obligations that you would say, we sort of get it, but we don't? These things are probably costing us more to implement. We don't really think they're helping the public. Is there anything that you're aware of from a regulatory standpoint that if you had the chair's ear that you would say, you may want to take a hard look at getting rid of that rule?
Nothing at the federal level for us. It's just navigating the different state and local laws is a bit of a challenge to stay on top of it. But I think in general, you have the laws here and the best practices here. So as long as we're following the best practices while being mindful of the laws, there's nothing more that we would push back on. But I haven't really dove into that too much.
Brian?
Yeah, specifically for us, Vonage is actually taking a very aggressive approach to this. So when Commissioner Carr made that statement, put that request out there, we did solicit quite a few different responses from our brands. One of the things is that TCPA legislation is very specific to voice with only a tiny aspect of reference to messaging. And so we're not actually asking for things to be taken away, but we're more asking for greater clarification of that with a reduction slightly of the TCPA language in the document itself. The secondary aspect is that there's not as much financial considerations when there is a fine. I think that the FCC now, very much with the Telnex thing, has changed that stance. And so messaging platform companies like Vonage are really, really looking at that, saying, okay, what is our risk profile here? Because we are at risk. So then taking that in consideration, and then what he had said of, hey, can we delete? We have to be very, very careful, and everyone in this room needs to be very careful about what we do get rid of, because nobody likes speed limits, but who says you should be going 110 through a school zone? So, I'm all for all of us giving good direction, but this is chess, not checkers. And we need to think about the next 3 stages, next 3 steps, if we do take something away. And what will that allow? Will it allow more fraud? Will that give us a less of a security profile? Will that allow bad actors to come into the market easier? Will that allow bots? So let's not just take things away. Let's look at it and examine.
Great point.
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. I've never actually thought about it before.
Well, maybe if we actually prepared for this panel, we
I
would
know,
have gave you guys time to do
Had we
that.
it ahead of time?
Yeah, we should have actually tried to do some preparation,
Yeah.
but next time.
That's all right, though, because, I've never been in a really strong position to push back on the FCC anyway. But EZTexting, our strategy is just to operate above the curve. I really want us to be in a situation where we're always proactive and not reactive. So for us, at this point, there's nothing that I would be pushing back on. And I don't know if we're going to touch on the one-to-one consent or anything like that. Okay, I'll let you get there.
So just I'm going to just give a couple of other things that are at the FCC. Then sticking to the plan, we'll open this up for questions. Sarah sort of segued to one-to-one consent. This was the lead generator rule. We thought things were going to change. The court said, no, they're not. I think the parties, the interveners, may have asked for like a full panel review of that. So it's possible, but the FCC is not pursuing it. So I think one-to-one consent is probably sort of DOA.
What about so on March 17th, the 27 AGs put forth a request to have that reviewed.
Right.
So I think it's up
to
to
the full court.
Yeah, to the full court. So to the 11th Circuit Court.
Right.
So I think that will come back. I think it will raise its head again.
Okay.
The bigger challenge there, and Glenn had talked about this, the Trump administration has put forth an edict stating that there will be no changes that were established in the previous administration or a change in the new administration. So if you said in the new administration or the old administration that you have to change this and it's going to take effect in 2025, Trump administration basically came in and said, nope, none of that changes. It's all going to stay the same, no changes whatsoever. So it puts us in an interesting spot. The one-to-one consent rule, we were all for it 1,000%. I would highly love to argue with somebody who thinks that it's not a good ruling, and I was very disappointed when it got shot down.
So one other petition that's pending that may be of interest to folks here, it has to do with the quiet hours and what the scope of consent. So we called the E-commerce Innovation Alliance filed a petition basically, asking the commission to confirm that if I've got Sarah's consent to text or call her, that the prohibition on notifying her during certain what are called quiet hours doesn't apply to Sarah, because that consent should be broad enough to cover those quiet hours. Apparently, at least according to the petition, plaintiffs' lawyers have sort of gone after. It's become sort of a fertile area for plaintiffs' lawyers to bring TCPA actions to these quiet hours, so they're asking the FCC to weigh in. So we've got, trying to stick to plan. We have a good 4 minutes left before we wrap up. Do we have any questions related to the compliance?
Hey, Web Bostic here from Wonder Cave, so representing like the CSP layer, but really appreciate y'all's feedback. And you hear a lot about the things y'all are doing in the absence of very clear-cut regulations. Like Khaled, you mentioned like the 2% threshold that y'all have decided to take an action on when it's crossed. And then referring to like the Telnic situation, which is interesting, of the know your customer. I'm curious y'all's thoughts on one gap for us as a platform is the inability to see what junk was reported, for example. So like things that we would love to know more about, maybe it's not upfront know customer, but it's like evaluate customer along the way, which is like a respectful ask of like carrier partners. So I'm just curious, like if you could wave a wand on certain things, like certain gaps that exist in operation, what those would be.
Yeah, what Webb is talking about is the 7726 report. So the 7726 report is when an individual swipes left and it's delete and report spam. That report, that then populates the 7726 report. So that would be wildly helpful to get that information, that data goes directly to the carriers, and they hold that. And we would love to be able to get that information. There's some technical hurdles that need to be crossed before that can be shared out. And I know that the carriers are looking to share that directly with with their direct connect aggregators. So that's definitely something that would help all of us in the marketplace, because much like what Sarah had said, you can use AI to look at the sentiment, but the 7726 data field, that'll really give you like a hard pinpoint of this was a problem and this is the material data behind it.
And I would also say, like similar to how we monitor opt-out, it'd be super helpful for customers that are using SMS that are not really savvy or they don't know it well, they're just getting experience with it. If they also receive the spam reporting like they do the opt-out, they can realize like, oh, actually I might be turning away my customers. Sometimes it's not necessarily malicious, but they're uneducated and they don't know that sometimes it's more about quality and not quantity. So it would be helpful.
Further questions?
Really more related to like debt collections, right? So 2023, I think it was $6 billion for the CPaaS. It's going to grow to $17 billion by 2030 for CPaaS, and that includes texting. For debt collections, it's really, there's safe harbor in Reg F, but it's hard to get a 10 DLC for the agencies. Do you see that changing, or do you see that staying the same?
So with debt collection or account resolution, the biggest challenge is that you can represent the holder of the original debt. You can be a second-party representative, and then when you get into some areas of concern is when you're a third-party representative. And that's really some of the concern itself. I know that the TCR team, they're looking specifically at how does that vertical specifically work with inside 10 digital long codes. It is a niche use case, but what guidance that we give is that you must represent the entity that holds the debt itself, not the entity that bought the debt. Because that typically is what can happen. They'll buy the debt, and then they'll go after, and none of the rules and regulations apply at this point. They'll go after the individual, because all they're trying to do is get a percentage of the original debt, and then they made money. So, that's a really big concern, and it's something that, we brought forth as well as we educate our customers on. Look, are you first party or are you second party? If you are third party, this is what that is defined, and I'm sorry, but you can't play here with us.
No, I think that all makes sense.
All right, well, we're 30 seconds over. Are we allowed? Am I going to lose my bonus if we go over?
This isn't. Oops.
Okay.
This isn't a question, but a comment. Carol Meyer with Calera.
Well, this doesn't count then.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
Who watched the news last night, and at least 3 of the commercials were from the same lawyer saying that if you got a call or a text after 9:30 p.m., give us a call. We'll get you money.
But you didn't call me, Carol.
He'll be really sad if any of that changes. We'll make a lot of lawyers very sad. So, which is not a question, but a hope.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.